Chapter 3: Troll in the Dungeons. The next morning, Saturday, I woke without the weight of lessons. My chambers held the faint scent of dried herbs. I reached for my journal, tracing the notes I had scratched into the page. The formula for the improved draft of peace glared back at me, unfinished. A sharp tap against the window pulled me from thought. The owl was large, the ministry's seal tied to its leg. It pushed its beak against the glass until I unlatched the catch. The bird stepped onto my desk, scattering a few loose scraps of parchment. I broke the seal. The letter was brief, written, put in a hand that wasted no ink. Professor Snape, due to a shortage of stock. The department requests immediate assistance in brewing the following: blood replenishing potion, calming draught, and 5 phials of veritaserum restricted use. Aura. Office only. Your cooperation is required. Required. They never bothered with politeness. I set the parchment down and took up my quill to the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Your request has been received. Stock for blood replenishing potion can be supplied within the week. Calming draught requires precise brewing and will not be rushed, but you shall have it before month's end. As for veritaserum, 3 months are necessary for proper maturation. If you are asking for 5 phials within days, you are asking for counterfeit it. I do not brew counterfeits. Snaptha. Quill left a thin scratch at the end of my name. I rolled the parchment tight and tied it back to the owl's leg. The bird fixed me with a round eye before lifting into the green light that filtered through the lake. The owl had not gone far before I called it back with a flick of my fingers. It circled once, wings brushing the glass, then landed again with a soft thud. I pulled the reply back from its leg. A correction was necessary. The ministry never considered the value of a potion master's time. They thought ingredients grew on castle walls, that labor cost nothing, that skill could be summoned like water from a tap. I uncapped the ink. Snap addendum. All potions supplied by my hand will be invoiced. Blood replenishing potion requires myrtlap essence, which the ministry does not stock. Calming draught consumes powdered moonstone, not inexpensive. Veritaserum demands not only materials, but 3 months of constant oversight. Payment is expected upon delivery. If this is unacceptable, I suggest you locate another brewer foolish enough to work without compensation. This time, I let the quill rest hard on the page. The owl clicked its beak as though impatient. I tied the parchment back and sent it on its way. When the last trace of its wings had faded into the lake light, I turned to my journal again. The draft of peace, a potion for easing agitation, softening grief, stilling the storm in a restless mind. In theory, gentle. In practice, treacherous. Brew it a degree too hot, and the drinker slips into stupor. Brew it to cool, and the result is useless water. I had seen students butcher it into frothing messes, their cauldrons clouded with the smell of scorched valerian. My notes filled the page in tight strokes. Powdered pearl replaces moonstone, steadies the shimmer, grants stability in heat. Test ratio: 1 dram pearl, 2 6 parts asphodel infusion. Valerian reduced to half measure. Retains calm without pulling under. Add hellebore sparingly. Stir widdershins, not clockwise. A risk, certainly. But if it worked, the potion would quiet a troubled mind without dragging it into fog. No more half-sleeping victim. No more ministry clerks demanding a calming draught, as if it were a sweetmeat from honeydukes. A knock, thin, insistent, shattered the quiet. I did not move at once. Few dared to disturb me here. When the sound came again, sharper, I rose from by the desk and crossed the chamber. Filch stood hunched in the doorway, his lantern throwing greasy light across the stones. Mrs. Norris pressed against his boots, her lamp-like eyes cutting into the shadows behind him. "What?" I said. Filch shifted his grip on the lantern, as though the handle burned his hand. "Begging your pardon, Professor, but there's been play activity up near the 3rd floor. Movements in the dark round the forbidden corridor." My eyes narrow. "Students, that's what I thought." His voice rasped with eagerness, as if already tasting the punishments he might deal. But when I got there, not a sound, not a shadow left. Only Mrs. Norris here. At the sound of her name, the cat lifted her head, ears pricked. She let out a long, throaty sound, somewhere between a growl and a yowl, glaring up at me as if I were the one under suspicion. I looked down at her. "And what exactly did you see?" Mrs. Norris arched her back, tail stiff, and gave a series of sharp, indignant cries. Filch crouched a little, lantern swaying. "She saw someone. She did. She never mistakes. Not her." She followed the trail, straight to the corridor. "If she says there was someone there, there was. She is a cat," I said flatly. Mrs. Norris spat, as though I had insulted her to the marrow. Her tail lashed against Filch's boot. Filch bristled, half rising again. Mrs. Norris sees more than any of these useless brats, more than most start. If I'm saying true, if she says there was someone, there was. I studied them both. The squinting, oily caretaker, and the female cat at his side. The 3rd floor, the forbidden corridor. "Very well," I said at last. "If there are shadows where there should be none, I will see them for myself. Leave this to me." Filch's face fell, hope of punishments slipping through his fingers. Mrs. Norris gave one last hiss before pressing herself back against his leg, her gaze never leaving me. I shut the door on them both and turned back into the room. The journal lay open, silver notes glinting in the green glow from the window. The draught of peace would have to wait. With a sweep of my wand, the ink dried on my open journal. Another flick sealed the files on my shelves, corks tightening themselves with faint pops. The fire beneath the cauldron sighed into darkness, leaving only the glow from the lake outside. My chambers held their order once more. I straightened my robes with a tug, then drew my wand across the air. The faint dust clinging to the hem vanished. My hair, unruly from sleep, smoothed under the charm. I lifted my wand, purple. Night's residue left my skin at once. Vestio, fresh robes wrapped into place, black folds settling sharp and precise. Composure restored, I turned for the door. To appear before the castle, one must appear composed. When I opened the door again, the corridor was empty. Filch and his shadow-eyed cat had already slunk away, no doubt back to their patrols. Only the scent of lamp oil lingered. I moved upward through the stone passages. The dungeons gave way to staircases that twisted like restless serpents. Voices grew louder the higher I climbed. Children spilling into the corridors, careless, loud. Near the entrance to the great hall, I nearly collided with Pomona Sprout. Her robes smelled of damp soil, and there was a smear of earth across her sleeve where she had clearly wiped a hand. "Severus," she said, her round face flushed from the morning's work. "Off to breakfast." I inclined my head. "Eventually. But first, what do you know of an intruder in the castle?" Her brow furrowed beneath her patched hat. "Intruder? Has someone been where they ought not?" "Filch came to me at dawn," I replied. "He claims there was movement near the third-floor corridor. Mrs. Norris saw someone, though when he arrived, the place was empty." Sprout's mouth pursed. "Empty places don't always mean empty students, or something worse." I studied her. Sprout had never been a woman given to melodrama, yet the faint unease in her eyes was genuine. Students would be foolish enough. But if it was not, the doors to the great hall opened with a push, and sound rolled out in waves, clattering cutlery, laughter that cracked like firecrackers, voices bouncing against the enchanted ceiling. The sky above mirrored a pale autumn morning, streaked with thin clouds. The great hall's din filtered up to our table, first years shrieking over howlers. The Weasley twins' latest explosion echoing from the Gryffindor table. I slid into my chair as a house elf whisked away yesterday's wilted roses, replacing them with fresh chrysanthemums that made Sprout nod approvingly. Platters steamed before us, fried tomatoes, thick slices of toast, a silver jug of pumpkin juice. Minerva McGonagall poured herself tea, her expression sharp even in repose. Across from her, Flitwick balanced on a cushion, chuckling at some private thought. Minerva cleared her throat, a sound sharp enough to cut through Hagrid's enthusiastic retelling of how his pumpkins had grown 3 sizes overnight. She waited, one eyebrow arched. "We have a new seeker," Minerva announced. Hagrid looked up from his bacon, crumbs in his beard. "About time. Wood's been pestering everyone for weeks." "Who'd you find?" Flitwick asked Harry Potter. The words hit like a stunning spell. "Potter." I dropped my fork. "He's been here only a month, and the rules forbid first years," I said. "Rules are flexible when we haven't won the cup in 7 years." Minerva's accent sharpened. "I watched him fly yesterday, chasing Longbottom. Remembrall 30 feet up. I set down my cup harder than necessary. An unwise decision, Minerva. Utterly reckless." An owl landed on the table, scattering crumbs. Dumbledore shooed it away gently. "Perhaps we should trust Minerva's judgment," he said mildly. "She has produced more professional players than any other head of house." "Two," Minerva said with pride. My napkin hit the table with quiet finality. "Don't summon me when it goes wrong. I turned on my heel and left them to their delusions. Behind me, I could hear Hagrid's booming laugh and Flitwick's excited chatter about Quidditch strategies. The normal sounds of a normal morning at Hogwarts, where nothing was ever truly normal at all. Harry Potter, the boy who lived, has become the Gryffindor seeker. And somewhere in the shadows of the castle, I knew dark things were already beginning to stir. I was observing the students as they moved through the hall when a sudden clatter of footsteps and a high-pitched squeal of terror drew my attention. Harry had paused mid-bite, a baked potato in hand, and every other student froze in surprise. Professor Quirrell came sprinting into the hall, turban skewed at a precarious angle, robes flapping, face pale beneath the thin fabric. His wide eyes darted around as if the very walls might collapse on him. He reached Dumbledore's chair with a stumble, bowing briefly to the headmaster before gasping out, "Troll in the dungeons. Thought you ought to know." I noted the tremor in his hands, the way his knees almost buckled beneath him. A faint whimper escaped his lips, but he did not fall. The chaos in his wake was enough to alert even the most distracted first year. I allowed my eyes to sweep the hall, cataloging each startled face, noting those whose reflexes, or lack thereof, might serve them in the coming minutes. The moment Quirrell's shrill announcement of a troll in the dungeons reached the hall, chaos erupted. Students screamed and surged toward the exits, robes flaring like startled birds. Some tripped over benches, sending silverware and plates clattering to the stone floor. First years clung to one another, shrieking, while older students tried to restore order. Though panic had already taken root, the air smelled of spilled pumpkin juice and fear, sharp and metallic. I moved through the hall, ignoring the swirl of panic around me. Near the stairwell, I saw Slytherin head prefect, Mr. Spellwyn, escort first year to the common room at once. "Ensure no one lags behind." "Yes, sir," he said. He gestured with her wand, and the Slytherin students lined up quickly, moving under his guidance down the polished stairs. Even as the students streamed away, a thought nagged at me. The third floor, the troll, or the chaos surrounding it, could be a distraction. Someone might be taking advantage of the panic to cover their movements. I adjusted my robes and walked toward the corridor leading to the third floor, wand in hand. A ripple of movement caught my eye, and I stiffened. At first, I thought it must be another panicked student, but the gate was wrong. Too hesitant, too awkward, yet fumbling in its own peculiar way. It was Quirrell, the same thin, flustered man who had shrieked about a troll in the dungeons, sending half the hall into chaos, was the one now climbing the stairs toward the third floor. His robes flapped about his knees, catching on corners of the banister. His turban sat at a precarious angle atop his head, one side drooping as though gravity itself had decided to ridicule him. Pale lips pressed together, quivering slightly, and his hands twitched uselessly near his chest, as if to ward off some imagined attacker. He jumped, nearly colliding with the wall, and then jerked upright in an awkward bow turban tilting further at an alarming angle. Professor Snape, what? I interrupted, voice sharp enough to slice through his stammer. My eyes bored into his, tracking every nervous twitch of his fingers. Explain your presence here, on the 3rd floor, alone. Quirrell's hands fumble at the edge of his robes, twisting the fabric as though it might shield him from my gaze. I saw a troll in the dungeons. I came here to help. I raised a single eyebrow, letting the silence stretch like a blade. Yes, the troll. And yet, instead of safeguarding students where they might actually be, you dash off to the 3rd floor. Brilliant strategy, really. Could you elaborate on the logic behind this master? He swallowed, hands clutching his turban as if it might anchor him to reality. I thought, well, I needed to warn others, Severus. I let out a quiet, cutting laugh, sharp and cold. The 3rd floor is deserted, forbidden to students. Pray, Professor Quirrell, whom exactly did you intend to warn? The portraits, the dust. Quirrell flinched, his pale lips parting in a gasp. No, Severus. I panicked, and I ran here, of course, I said, stepping closer so he could feel the chill of my presence. Panic. Naturally, the perfect excuse for running straight into a corridor you have no business in. Marvelous foresight. Quirrell stammered one last incomprehensible protest, tugging at his turban as if it could shield him from reason itself. I'm sorry, Severus. Suddenly, there is an echoing crash carried through the castle. Even before the sound faded, I could see Quirrell's pale face blanch beside me, turban slightly askew, hands twitching nervously. Let's go and check, I said. I made my way to the 2nd floor, my steps echoing along the empty corridor. I arrived just in time to see Professor McGonagall storming into the girls' bathroom, eyes blazing, followed closely by myself. My wand at the ready. The troll lay sprawled across the tile floor, massive limbs splayed at unnatural angles, club discarded. Beside it, a dull crack marking the spot where it had finally succumbed. Its coarse black fur was matted with water and grime, and a grayish, sticky substance smeared its nostrils and upper lip. His chest rose and fell with slow, uneven breaths, the faintest hint that it had not entirely ceased life, only been rendered unconscious. Harry stood panting nearby, wand still in hand, shoulders tense, hair plastered to his forehead with sweat. Weasley boy lingered, wide-eyed, staring at his own handiwork, wand trembling slightly in his grip. Granger girl crouched against the far wall, knees drawn to her chest, eyes darting from troll to boys. Quirrell brought up the rear, and his thin frame trembling. The moment his gaze fell on the troll, he let out a high-pitched whimper and collapsed onto the nearest chair, clutching his chest, as though it might stop the beating of his fear. I moved forward, bending over the creature to examine. It is knocked out. McGonagall's gaze fixed on Harry and Weasley. What on earth were you thinking of? McGonagall's voice cut like a whip. You're lucky you weren't killed. Why aren't you in your dormitory? From the shadows came a small, determined voice. Please, Professor McGonagall. They were looking for me, said Granger. I went looking for the troll because I thought I could deal with it on my own, she admitted. You know, because I've read all about them. McGonagall's lips thinned in exasperation. Miss Granger, you foolish girl. How could you think of tackling a mountain troll on your own? 5 points will be taken from Gryffindor, McGonagall said, though her anger softened slightly. I'm very disappointed in you. If you are unharmed, you may return to Gryffindor Tower. Students are finishing the feast in their houses. Granger left, and McGonagall turned her attention to the boys. Well, you were lucky, she said, though the edge of concern in her tone belied her words. Not many first years could have taken on a full-grown mountain troll. You each earn 5 points for Gryffindor. Professor Dumbledore will be informed. You may go